Always love to get this guy in here, get his insight on what's going on around the league. More importantly, what's going on with these Arizona Cardinals after Kyler Murray made his debut. Sam Monson, you can check him out, of course, on a daily basis, the PFF NFL podcast. Sam, just your main takeaway right off the bat, Kyler Murray's return on Sunday, victorious over the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a win is its own thing, but the most impressive or most notable thing I thought was immediately Kyler Murray is running, right? He's scrambling, he's using his legs. He's not thinking, I'm not 100%. I've got to be more of a pocket passer. I can't do what makes me Kyler Murray. Right from the jump, he was scrambling around. He was making some plays with his legs. And then the end, that last kind of run, I mean, he was pulling out some sort of vintage Oklahoma Kyler Murray type plays where, he's going running around for an age back there and then eventually making something special happen. So I think that was a really nice game from him as a return. Still clearly a little bit rusty from a passing point of view, but I think that's a good thing as well because there's more to come. But a really positive return for him and positive for the team's perspective in terms of like they're going to be a better team now with Kyler Murray than they have been for the first half of the season.
Yeah, it really does feel like he's like a win, max 2 wins away from like completely dismissing any notion that they would take a quarterback. We had you on the show, I think like 4 months ago, and just the state of the Cardinal roster in conjunction combining with his injury, it was like, the Cardinals are going to be in this until they're not. And it really does feel like his ability to elevate this team that I think was already kind of playing above expectations, at least from an effort standpoint. They're going to be feisty down the stretch. They've got 7 games. I think at least half are winnable with a quarterback of his caliber.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be a problem that kind of takes care of itself one way or the other, right? Like if Kyler Murray wins enough games, they're not going to be in a position to draft his successor anyway, and he's probably the guy. If Kyler Murray loses every single game, then he's probably not shown enough that's going to keep you away from drafting his successor anyway. So it's the one big question that the Cardinals have to answer down the stretch, but it almost isn't a question they even need to dedicate an awful lot of mental runtime to because it's going to like take care of itself either way, just by virtue of where they're picking in the draft. But that really is the purpose, right? Is get Kyler Murray out there. It's a new regime. They don't have investment in him above and beyond the fact that they've given him like the contract is his already. So there is a literal investment in him in terms of salary cap and in terms of that contract, but they're not tied to him in a way that the old regime was. They have to evaluate him and figure out what he looks like in this offense going forward. And if he's going to be the guy, the very first glimpse we've seen suggests that he can be that guy again. And I suspect if that's the guy we're getting going forward, or even an improved version, once he knocks some of the rust off, like he's going to be seen as the future for this team.
Sam, can you help the crowd out? Because there's always a team tank with a lot of franchises that are struggling during a given season, and they want to see their team at least pay off as far as all the horrible games that they had to watch throughout the season. Can you maybe give them a good reason of why it benefits the Arizona Cardinals, despite falling down draft boards, to win football games down the stretch with Kyler Murray?
Well, the first part is what we just talked about, right? If they're winning games with Kyler Murray, with arguably, the worst roster in the NFL or one of the worst rosters in the NFL, that's a great thing for them going forward because it means you have a quarterback that can already elevate a bad situation, right? And you don't need to go and draft the quarterback at the top of the draft, which is basically the only purpose to tanking, right? Like everyone sees this as, oh, we stink right now. We got to tank. We got to get the top draft pick. But the only reason you do that is to get the next quarterback that you think can elevate the franchise. You're not doing that for like the number one offensive tackle in the draft or the number one edge rusher, right? You're doing it for the quarterback. And if you already have the quarterback, then you don't need to do the tanking. You just need some draft picks generally and start restocking the talent across the board. So if they're winning games, it means they probably already have the quarterback and they don't need to go out of their way to tank to get the better draft pick. And that really is the important thing for this team. They're going to be well set up in the draft anyway, because they have multiple first round picks. They don't need one of them to be number 1, number 2 overall.
We don't get many blue grades from PFF around these parts. Those are the elite grades. So I was excited to see that old Trey McBride earned a 96.2 grade for his outing against the Atlanta Falcons. Is this do you think a sign of things to come? Perfect storm given the situation with Atlanta. I think he has like the physical traits to
Oh
be a
yeah.
top 10 tight end and just needed the opportunity. Ertz was in his way, Kyler Murray not being around, rhythm targets. What I saw, I think what many of us in this fan base saw was a guy that was violent after the catch that has just supremely high upside at the position.
Yeah, and I've been waiting for it, right? Like I
Right.
loved him at draft time. I never quite understood why he wasn't seen as a first round talent at tight end. He was the offense in college, and I thought it was a great fit for him to end up in Arizona, and I'd been sort of waiting for this level of opportunity and production from him, and we started to see it the last few weeks. When you're right, they finally just given him the role and said, "Okay, we've got this guy. Let's see what he can do. Let's load him up with the targets instead." And see what happens. And you're seeing the kind of talent and ability that he brings to the table. So I think it's great timing, right? In addition to Kyler Murray coming back in a new offense and a new system, you've got quite a lot of these young guys, whether it's Trey McBride, whether it's Michael Wilson. Marquise Brown is a little further along, obviously, in his career, but is still in that kind of younger category. You have this quite young, talented collection of playmakers that theoretically could coalesce into this impressive group of skill position players quite quickly if they can all, gel together over the second half of the season.
It certainly helps kickstart a rebuild. Maybe not blue grades over PFF, but certainly PFF grade darlings this past weekend. 3 of the top 10 rookies that graded out for this Arizona Cardinals team are on the defensive side of the football, Sam. And you've got, Garrett Williams, who's now played in 3 games that looks really good playing in the nickel position, slot corner. BJ Ujulari had a coming out party with 2 sacks. And then you've got Dante Stills, their final pick in their entire draft this past spring. Just what does this do for the team going forward if they can hit on 3 picks on that side of the football?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, the defense looked like a real problem on paper heading into the season.
Yeah.
It's played above itself so far this season. I think it's been impressive how much they've actually been able to compete on that side of the ball, given what it looked like it was going to be. But an influx of talent is huge, and if they can hit on some of these draft picks, I love Garrett Williams at draft time. I thought he had a lot of talent. Obviously, had the injury which dropped him down the draft, but that guy has a lot of kind of click and close ability, some real playmaking ability with the ball in the air. He could absolutely be a find for them. I was a little bit lower on BJ Ojulari than a lot of people, but he had a very well-rounded skill set, a broad toolbox of pass rushing skills. And if he is sort of as good in the NFL as he was in college, which is entirely possible, then he'll be a productive pass rusher for them. So yeah, if they're able to add 2 or 3 players from last draft that are going to be, even just quality starters for the team going forward, it's a huge step in the right direction with, another draft to come.
Let's talk about their first round pick from this year. Paris Johnson Jr. hasn't missed a snap this year, had a good outing against Atlanta. But I do think that, the expectation is difficult for these rookie offensive linemen, to come in and make a name for themselves, specifically on PFF scoring grade. Like we've talked about it before. Very difficult. Like, are there positives that you see, not only just with Paris, but like rookie tackles in general, where it's like, yeah, the grade may not be 80, 90, but here's a positive. Here are things that we look for at the position that can really culminate in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for offensive linemen in general to come into the league and hit the ground running, right? It's a really tough spot to play. In particular, the offenses are different. There's a lot of offenses in college where those guys are not exposed to particularly a large volume of sort of true pass sets and asked to pass protect the way they are in the NFL. And then the level of competition is also not even in the same ballpark, right? Everybody they are going up against in the NFL is as good as the best person they faced in college. Like as a general rule of thumb, that's probably the type of leap you're expecting from any of these guys. Like every week is like going up against the best player they ever played at the college level. So it's a huge jump forward in strength of competition and just difficulty of ask. So when you're looking at these guys, you're wanting to see sort of signs of growth, right? You're wanting to see even inconsistent high level play. If you can just see that they can get to that level and they can have a game against a good guy, then the other stuff will probably come, right? They will get used to that level and they will be able to iron out the bad play and they'll be able to get a higher level of consistency. You just want to see some development and the ability to keep their head above water. They don't need to be dominant right out of the box. Like the number of offensive linemen that are able to come into the league and immediately hit the ground running and look like one of the best guys in the league. It's such a small number. Usually that's a position that takes, 2 years to get to that kind of level. So you're looking for those signs. You're looking for those green shoots of growth and just the reason to be optimistic rather than, yes, he's already solved the problem.
Is there anybody on this roster that you're a bit bullish on that maybe transcends their PFF grades that you think have played better this season than maybe their grade would suggest?
Not necessarily played better than the grades suggest, but obviously Dennis Gardeck, I think, has been a real surprise this season and a positive force for that defense. And a guy that, started off as a kind of special team specialist and then has transitioned into more of a full-time player, been a pretty useful source of pass rush for them. I think the move of Zaven Collins from off the ball linebacker to like edge rusher, that's a rare move in terms of both how often teams even try it and how often it works. It doesn't tend to be something that happens very often in the NFL. Micah Parsons obviously is one example of it working out, but Micah Parsons was a guy that had some kind of backstory of being an edge rusher in his past. Zaven Collins doesn't. He just looks like one physically, but he's actually started to turn a corner and I think become a useful player then. And then every time I watch Arizona, a guy that stands out to me is Victor Dimukeje on the defensive line. Like that guy's been making some plays this year. And I've been really impressed with him pretty much every time I watch the Cardinals.
I think also, sorry, Johnny, like another name, Hassan Reddick. And there's a common denominator here, Sam. It was Steve Keim drafts him and then miscast him as an off-ball linebacker instead of an edge rusher when it's clear as day. Like this is where those big-bodied, bendy guys deserve to or should play.
Well, they've had this weird run where they like drafted 3 different linebackers and arguably none of them are linebackers, right? Like Hassan Reddick was an edge rusher in college and they put him at off the ball linebacker because he kind of looked like one from a body type standpoint, but he was always an edge rusher, right? Then you have Isaiah Simmons, who I think fundamentally is a safety, but he looks like a linebacker. So we're going to play him at linebacker. And then you have Zaven Collins, who actually was a linebacker, but has an edge rusher's body type. And now we don't really know what to do with him. But like, I think he's different from Reddick in terms of he doesn't have this track record of being an edge rusher. He just has the body of an edge rusher. So it's like the mistake they made with Hassan Reddick, but it actually looks like it might be working out. Like they've kind of gone in reverse, right? They've taken a guy that genuinely was an off the ball linebacker and they've moved him to the edge because he looks like he should play there. And early on, it looked like that might not be a good idea. It's kind of, you've already tried that the other way around and it didn't work. But actually, the longer he plays there, the more it does look like he's able to make that transition and make an impact.
Yeah, God bless Steve Keim and all of his ridiculous drafting. Monty Ossenford looks like went 1 for 1 in his draft last spring. Let's talk about next spring for a second. Let's assume the season ends up well for Kyler Murray. Hopefully the trajectory is a couple more wins. They pick up, his contract. They move forward with him as their franchise quarterback. How would you like to see this team tackle the roster this offseason? $80+ million in cap space, 12 to 13 draft picks, tons of flexibility. They've already remade this roster in about 6 months for the better. Is there like 1 or 2 things, and it doesn't even need to be like players by name, that you would target for this roster, like immediately to stand out to you?
Yeah, I honestly don't think they even need to go that crazy. If you assume that the young skill position players they have are going to develop and sort of move forward together, both in the second half of the season and going forward, you project a developmental curve for those guys. I think you can always keep working on the offensive line, particularly the interior. I would want to strengthen that area of the line if I could, and then really target defense. I think the group we mentioned, it's been playing above itself. There's been those young players that have shown that they might be parts of the solution, but still, it's still a weakness on paper relative to other teams. Just load up on defense. I think you can dip into free agency, maybe bring in 1 or 2 guys there that you think are really good fits in terms of the right age profile, the right quality, are worth spending the money for. but then just repeat the draft, take as many draft picks as you can, try and hit on as many as possible, and hope that you can move this thing forward with a big jump if you get enough contributors.
We'll get you out on this one. The news today, the Arizona Cardinals awarded the claim on Michael Carter from the Jets. Seemed like he was a casualty just of a logjam of backs in that New York Jets running back room. I'd imagine he brings a big boost behind James Conner at the playmaking wise to that running back room for the Cardinals that wasn't there behind JC.
Yeah, and he's a very different type of runner from James Conner as well. So it's a nice kind of compliment in terms of a change of pace, a true change of pace, a guy that does bring a different level of speed, quickness, sort of what's the best word? Like elusiveness. He's very difficult to bring down. He's sort of small, quick, stocky, makes those kind of quick, immediate cuts. So I think it's a fun player actually to add to the mix as a real change of pace that makes defenses think, when you go from this guy that is more of a sort of bigger, I don't want to use the word slow, like James Conner's not slow, but a more deliberate type of runner. And then you suddenly add in this guy that's much more of a jitterbug, smaller guy. It is a difficult thing.
Like what they had with Chase Edmonds once upon a time.
Yeah, right.
Love it. Low risk for Monty Ossenfort and the Arizona Cardinals. It was great having, of course, our guy Sam Monson. Check him out, the PFF NFL podcast. Follow him on Twitter at PFF_Sam. Love the work every day that you do, Sam. Appreciate it. Check his stuff out, and we'll talk to you soon.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys.